like, we can look at this. It looks pretty confusing to me. It's actually not so bad if you start to break it down. But you can see it's like pretty long here. Right. Okay. So, what you should do, like, I think the right way to read something like this is, really like every Docker file, it starts with a from statement. Okay. It has like this kind of like meat in the middle, and then it ends with a command. Okay. So like this is the pattern that you'll always see with a Docker statement. The from statement, this is building on an existing image, essentially like inheriting, right? If you've heard that word in object-oriented programming, right? From an existing image. So this means everything that, if we look up, everything that was performed in node bullseye select. All the components that are in here, you can see this is not exactly the Docker file. Let's see if I can look for it here. It's a little hard. But all the components, you can basically get a sense of it, that were in this Docker file, right? Starting from like bash. Right? And here they install Node, I'm guessing. All of these components are essentially like copied and pasted by virtue of just having this right here. Okay? And then so at this point we've already installed Node because that's what this image is about, right? And then we're going to now add something custom on top, right? So we'll have these various steps that we need to add as layers on top of this base image. And then at the very end, we say, how do we want to kick off the image when we call Docker run? Okay? So you always have these commands of like essentially from, and then there's a bunch of run commands. These run commands are what we're performing in bash, right? In the terminal. You just put the word run in front of it, right? And these, I'm guessing, are environmental variables, right? And then we see a lot of it is just like these bash commands to install various softwares. So let's go through this and let's try to build a Docker image. Let me see. Let me get rid of one of them. Yeah, we'll get rid of this. Docker image rm. Docker image rm. rm-f, right? Probably, if we have a container running. Okay, so let's try to build something. You can kind of get to the sense. We'll build this Kaggle Docker. And what we want to do is we'll start with our Jupyter Minimal Notebook. Okay, so we'll start with this, the Jupyter Minimal Notebook, and then we'll try to install Kaggle on top of it. Okay, so Kaggle, for those of you who don't know, this is like a very popular website. I forget if Microsoft bought it. It's essentially like a community where people post different competitions to complete like data science work, to do like kind of win various data science competitions. Different companies sponsor it, like Walmart has sponsored and like put up their data. It's also where you can get a lot of different data sets from Kaggle. And Kaggle has like an API. So we can try to use the API. To do so, right, essentially, like last times what I'll do is you can try to do the steps in the command line, right? Like if you want to install Kaggle, I think it's conda install Kaggle, right? Something like that, to install this Anaconda, like with Anaconda. I may not have conda here, but I think this will work. We're going to find out. Okay, so here's what we'll do. Let's start here. We're going to start by creating a Docker file. Notice I just do capital Docker file. There is no like dot at the end of this. Okay, and then we'll do code dot to look at this. And now remember kind of our format. We always start with the word from, Then we have a bunch of like run commands. So it's like from the base image. Then we have a bunch of run commands. And then finally we need the command, which is how we'll kick off Docker, or the image. All right. So for the from base image, that's going to be our minimal notebook. So starting here, right, essentially I want to install everything that this notebook specifies. I'll remove the comment so you can see we have like our nice little syntax highlighting. And then this time what I want to do is run conda install Kaggle. I think this will be fine. And then we'll just do command. So this is how we kick off our Jupyter notebook, which would be Jupyter Lab. So this command, right, if there's like multiple words, right, when we do like Jupyter Lab, right, if you type in this command, what you do, and kind of what you should always do, is put the command in a list. One thing to note is I'm using double quotes here. If you don't use double quotes, it will break and it will be a confusing error message. All right, so double quotes, double quotes. All right, now let's see if we can get this thing working. We're gonna do docker build dot, okay? The dot stands for the same thing as like in bash, right? I'm saying, hey, in the current directory, there should be a Docker file. All right, and it will look to see that there is a Docker file in this directory, and then if there is one, it will ideally build this thing. So you can see it's doing it right now. Let me try to make this bigger. This wasn't helpful. Okay, sorry about this. So it's loading the Docker file. There's no Docker file, ignore. You can see it's getting the definition from Jupyter Minimal Notebook. Oh, here, this is way better. Okay, Jupyter Minimal Notebook latest. This is the from command, right? Then it's finally doing the step 2 of run conda install Kaggle. And then it's essentially done. That last part, the run command, that's not performed until we actually, if you do this docker image ls, this is the thing we just created. All right? The run command is going to be performed when we do docker run this image. Notice there's no name here. That's very annoying, I'd say. We can give this a name. Let me just do this real fast. We'll give this a name by doing docker. We can do docker build -t. We'll call this my Kaggle image. This will essentially give this thing a name, and then we'll do dot. So I give this the -t flag to add a tag. The T stands for tag. And I'll call this Kaggle Jupyter or something like that. That works. And then same thing, I need to finish with, this is called the build context. All right. All right, that was pretty fast. And now if I do docker image ls, we can see that we do have this Kaggle Jupyter. So I'll do docker run. Again, let's take a look. Notice that there's only this second layer, the second step of run conda install Kaggle, and then from, we also have the from command from the beginning for the Jupyter Notebook, run conda install Kaggle. Again, that third step is not really performed until we do the run command. And when we do docker run, then it's going to run this command Jupyter Lab. So far, all it did was these two. All right, so we'll do docker run Kaggle Jupyter. If we do this, right, we're missing something. Right, we want to be able to access this thing at port 8888. We won't be able to, right, because what we need to do is do the -p thing. Right, we need to map the port from, let's give it 8890 to 8888. So again, this is my containers port. This is my host computer's port. Let's try this. We'll copy this and then hope that if I go to 8890, And we needed to hope harder. Okay. Yeah, I did something like this the first time, too. So let's just make sure. What port did I say? Here's booting up. Docker run Kaggle. Let's look for the word. Here I'm mapping port 8890, right? So let's just copy this. 88, and let's just copy this to make sure we got it. Yeah, I know. I had this issue before. And it just resolved on its own. Ah, somehow that helped. So that's not helpful. Oh, I must have something else running on 8890. That's the problem. Look at that. All right, so let's change the port. Let's change it to, we can make this port like whatever. 8999. All right, and let's copy this. I don't think I've copied it fully. Eight, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay, so now we have this thing. This is our Jupyter. This is from our container. If we look at this, let's try to import conda. We're going to get an error, but it's okay. Oh, I was not expecting that. Or not import conda, import Kaggle. Okay, so this is the issue. With Kaggle, right, you can access, you can like download different data sets. You can, actually submit if any competitions that you want to like enter, you can submit the related code for it, or at least essentially the related code, the answer for it. The problem is you need your authentication token, okay? I'll show you quickly how to get it, and then we'll show us the problem we're running into with Docker. So we need basically a JSON file, and we're also going to have to put this JSON file somehow inside of our Docker image, which is going to be interesting. We don't know how to do that yet, okay? So in order to get this thing, if you wanted to like follow along, you can go to, I believe, account, and then you scroll down, and then you see here's this create new API token. I already have mine on my computer. Here it is. All right. So the question is, like, this thing's on my host computer. How do we get this file inside of the container, right? And inside of the image. Okay. So what we can do is I'm just going to, let's close this down. And we're going to place this, move this inside right next to my Docker file. So cp-a dot. And then let's think about this. What we want to do, ideally, is, do we have this? See what it tells us? We want to make sure it's located in /home/jovian/Kaggle in the actual image. So one thing we can do to get started is we can copy, all right? So there's this command called copy. It should probably be, I guess it doesn't matter. Let's try it afterwards. So we'll install Kaggle, and then we'll copy Kaggle.json. Let's say into the current directory. We'll see what that means in a second. Let's just run this. So we'll do docker build. It should be up here. Docker build -t. I forget the name of it. It was Jupyter Docker image ls. This was it. So docker build -t Kaggle Jupyter. The build context, right? This looks for my Docker file. This Docker file, notice we now have this copy command. All right. So it's copying Kaggle JSON into the current directory. Let's take a look. See if this did anything, and then we can explain it some more. So do docker run Kaggle, not that, Docker run Kaggle Jupyter, dash p. What do we do? 8990 to, or 8999, that one was saved, to 8888. And let's take a look. All right, let's try to access this thing. If I just refresh this. Oh, it needs the token. 8999. Yeah, let's leave. All right, now here is our kaggle.json file. So this did somehow work. It's kind of interesting, right? What we did was we did this copy, right? We said copy kaggle.json into the current directory of the container. We can see that the current directory of the container was essentially where this, whatever is, we'll have to look at it in a second. But it was out just outside of this work folder. So we'll look at that in a second. But how did it know how to, like, where to find this file? Right? Like when I say like copy from the current directory, what it's looking at is it's looking at the build context. So when we did Docker, I'll do this one more time. When we did Docker build -t Kaggle Jupyter, this dot, right? This dot, when it runs the copy /, it's going to look at, well, what did you define when you did this Docker build -t Kaggle Jupyter? What did you define as the build context? The build context is the last argument. In this case, we're saying the build context is the current directory. So when we say copy /Kaggle JSON, we're saying from the build context on the host computer, copy into the current working directory in the Docker container. Okay? And that's what it did. If we want to, like, kind of look at this thing, we can, remember, we can, like, dig around. Let's actually connect, connect to the shell. We can see that this kaggle.json file was placed into home/Jovian. I think what we wanted to place it into with that error message, when the error message showed up, I think that what it told us to do was to place it into /home/Jovian/.kaggle. All right, so that's where we need, if we don't place it there, let's take a look at this again. Can I not exit? There we go. If we don't place it there, remember this whole problem. If we don't place it there, then when we do import Kaggle, right? Let's see what the error message says. Make sure it's located in /home/Jovian/Kaggle. It says make sure that file, this file, right, is located there, and it's not. So now we have to specify the directory that we're going to place this thing in, okay? The way that we can do that, like I think the easiest way for me, at least, is to, well, one thing is, like, I don't think we even have a folder called .kaggle. Sorry about that. I don't think we even have a file called, a folder called .kaggle. So we need to first make one. So the way that we can do this is with this other command called work directory, and I forget if it's, no, I guess it must be like this. So what will this do? This is going to do kind of two things. One, it's going to make this directory if it doesn't exist. So this is essentially the equivalent of make this new directory .kaggle. And the other thing it's going to do is cd into this directory. So you can think of working directory as, like, in the image, making this thing that you specify the current directory. And then when we copy .kaggle.json from my host computer, right, from my host computer here, it's going to be copying it into the current working directory in the image, which we just specified to be this. Okay? Let's see it, and then we can go through it again. So now what do we have to do? Again, we have to rebuild the image. Every time we make a change, you must rebuild the image, okay? So let's do it with docker build -t, kaggle.json. Let's take a look. We can see step 1, importing from Jupyter Minimal Notebook. Step 2 is running conda install kaggle. Step 3, changing the working directory, right? Both making this .kaggle folder and also like essentially CDing into that folder. Step 4, copying ./kaggle.json into this current working directory. And now let's do docker run kaggle Jupyter. Bash, if I just do bash, I'll exit, right? We need to do -it. And let's take a look. So notice this. One, when our Jupyter Notebook starts up now, we're automatically in this ./kaggle thing. We don't want that, but at least in here, we do have the kaggle.json in this directory, which is /home/jovian/kaggle. All right, so we did accomplish this step. Right, and the way that we accomplished it was by doing work directory /home/jovian/kaggle, and this time when we kaggle from our host computer into the image, this current directory was specified. Was specified up top here. All right. All right. Questions so far? We covered a good amount. Right, we talked about like you inherit from the base image. Run is essentially like the bash commands you want to run, right? We end with command. This is what you how we want the image or the container to kick off when we boot it up. We talked about then kind of like creating and CDing with .kaggle and also copying something from my host computer over to the current directory that's specified by this working directory argument. Okay, let's see what, I'll pause for a second, let you all absorb that. Yeah, Tim?
Yeah, I know you can also pass in like the location of a Docker file to run instead of using dot. If that's the case, is the build context the directory of that Docker file? I think it's with like the -f flag.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it would be.
Okay.
But I'd have to check.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions about this content so far? Does this make sense? Okay, let's boot this thing up. Feel free to jump in with questions. We'll just do this docker run, and let's take a look at the -p again. 89999 8888 docker run. All right, we're going to copy this way we get the token, and then we're going to change this to 8999. Okay, this is annoying, right? The fact that like we're starting if you look at it, we're starting in this .kaggle folder. Why are we starting there? Because we changed the current working directory to be .kaggle. So, and remember what this does is it both makes a directory if it doesn't exist, and it will CD into it. So after we copy kaggle into the current working directory of this thing, let's CD back out. And we can do that by there's a couple ways. We could either do the absolute path by just doing /home/jovian, or we can do the relative path, right? CD one folder out with a .. Let's do that because it's more fun. And then we'll do command Jupyter Lab. We're almost done. Okay. So we have to rebuild, and then we have to run. And let's just do the 8, 3 9s. Let's leave. And you see that now our current working directory is out of here, so we are good. If we import Kaggle, we are very close. Yeah, so it will work. It's giving us this warning, which is that we need to run chmod /home/jovian. We have to run, like, kind of restrict the accessibility of this Kaggle. Of basically, this has our credentials, so we want to restrict the accessibility of this. We can do that, like kind of anything that we would run from bash. We can just put the word run in front of it and run it. The problem we're going to have is we need to be a super user in order to do that. So you need to like set an environmental variable. I think it's like env equals like enable sudo equals yes. I forget. I probably have to cheat to look at this. So basically, to run this command, we need to be the super user. And in order to be the super user, we need to pass an argument called, I think it's like enable sudo. Let's take a look. Where this thing is defined, I believe it's going to be in the Jupyter Notebook. So let's just take a look. Jupyter Minimal Notebook, enable sudo. See this? We have to pass an environmental variable of grant sudo equals yes. Okay? So we can do that. You can see how they're doing this. They're doing this, they're doing a couple things. One, they're specifying the user that they're going to be as a root, and then they're passing an environmental variable of grant sudo equals yes. So we could do that, like actually do this when we run this thing, right? Just pass these additional flags. The problem is we want to do this before we run this command, right? We want to be the super user by this point. So what we could do instead is we'll just have the environmental variable by doing this env. And we'll do grant super user equals yes. And then finally we'll specify our user with the keyword of user. So we just added two more kind of commands. This is basically all there is of env, which is setting an environmental variable in our image, and also specifying the user to be root. This maybe should be reversed. I don't know if it matters. And let's see if this kind of allows for this. So we'll rebuild this again. And you don't have to understand, like, the readings will go through these last two steps. This is not super key. I broke something, didn't I? Running as root is not recommended. Use -- allow root to bypass. Okay.
Yeah, conda is like you're really not supposed to run it as root.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can perform this without. Let's rebuild. See, we can't perform it without that. I guess we could probably change back the user. I forget how I did this. All right, so we do this, but it's going to complain. Let's Google that error message. All right, let's see what happens when we run it. Okay, let's see about this use allow root to bypass. And this might be another environmental variable. I'm not sure. It looks like what they're doing, they just do this. Well, where does the quotation marks come in? Bin bash dash C. Yeah, it's, this is kind of getting confusing. We'll just take out this and then we'll break this. The main thing I wanted to show was that we can set the user and we can also set the environmental variable as that, through the Docker file. Okay, especially the environmental variable. That's a good thing to see. We can remove this just to boot this up for now. All right, well, this is good enough. So import Kaggle. You can see it is readable, right? We were working on that. I don't feel like debugging that live. Probably a good way to do that is to set the user as root, run this, and then change back the user afterwards, is what I'm guessing. All right, so this, what we covered so far, and essentially what I wanted to cover is, when you're writing a Docker file, you want to start by just thinking about like the three main steps, which is you start with the word from, and then you want to end with like our command. In between, you need to like perform some steps, right? Otherwise, you could have just used the original image. A lot of the steps are going to be with the run command, okay? So, and this is essentially what you would do in Bash. Lots of times it's good to even be in your local host environment, like in your laptop, and just run these commands locally, make sure they work, and then you can move it over to a Docker file. Then the other thing we saw was just like changing the working directory, right? And copying. Okay, so we saw like we can copy something from our host computer into the current working directory of the image. Okay. And then finally we saw, these are smaller things, but like we saw that we can set an environmental variable. So for example, I don't know if we can see, can I type in env here? Yeah. So for example, here, we should be able to see it. Did I not set it? Grand sudo equals yes. Oh, well, I think this most recent didn't have it, but we would see like the grand sudo equals yes as the environmental variable if that's how we built it. Okay. So you can set an environmental variable through the Docker file, and it will be set inside of your image. All right. So the main things, though, are of course like the working directory, the run, inherit from a base image, perform various run commands to build on top of it, and then finish up with your command. Remember, with the command, you need to use double quotes, otherwise it won't work. All right. And any questions before I deploy this material? Cool. All right, let me put you all in breakout rooms.